Hello, everyone. Welcome to Industry Matters. I'm Heather Trumm with VGM, and we are so excited to have Amanda Smithey with us again. She's full of knowledge, and I love hearing what she has to say about being successful in the wound care business. So Amanda, again, is the Senior Manager of Advocacy and Strategic Partnerships with McKesson, the HME Division. And we are doing a series. This is the second part in a 5-part series that we are recording of a podcast. So we are just going to get into session 2. And session 2, remind me, what is the topic on session 2, Amanda?
So I think for session 2, we really wanted to focus on diving in and developing that best in class wound care program.
All right. Perfect. So our first podcast was kind of doing the research, making sure that every HME out there that wanted to get into wound care did their research. So let's say that they have done that, check. They understand the surgical dressing market and the needs within the existing referral sources. They also see the opportunities for growth and what those are. What are the next steps to starting into the surgical dressing space?
Okay, so this one, again, is really going to focus on developing that program. And I think this is really important. This is also probably where the heaviest lift comes into play, is sitting down and developing your program. But I think you've got to do that before you can really put a strategy together or anything like that. And when I think about developing the program, there's 3 key areas to focus on. First and foremost, which makes the most sense, is the LCD and policy article review. Yeah. You've got to do a deep dive there. No way you can get around that. You really should almost have it memorized. And I hate to say this, I probably do have it memorized, which is
sad.
Good. But it comes in handy. You'd be surprised. The second part of that is really that formulary development, spending some time to understanding and deciding these are the items that I want to lead with. And we'll talk a lot more about how to make that work and how to work with referral sources with your new formulary that you've developed. And then the last part is the order process. So how do you fine tune that order process? So I think if you go through all of those areas of focus in developing your program, that is going to set you up for success in the following steps to getting you ready to go out into the market and get those referral sources.
Agree. I would totally agree. Okay, so the LCD and the policy article are so very important to know, and like you said, almost memorize. And I have the favorites saved on my computer in regards to always going back and looking at them, because even though it's just going back to make sure there's no policy article changes or anything like that. Plus, it solidifies whatever I'm telling the member is right. Usually I'll take a snippet and send it over. We at VGM, we have a surgical dressing guide that is a resource out there for the listeners as well, for a resource. But what are some other resources for really getting into that policy and LCD?
There's a ton of them out there. And I think that folks don't take the time to take advantage of those. I mean, first and foremost, just read it for yourself. Read it a couple of times so that you understand it. CGS and Noridian, they have a lot of great resources. There's a checklist that I refer to all the time on Noridian that I absolutely love. They also have that really cool chart with all the product categories and the criteria for reimbursement, the allowables. I think that's a really good piece to have. I'm going to plug us again, Heather. We do a surgical dressing boot camp. We'll be doing another cohort of that next summer. I think that's a great place for folks to go to get more intense and in-depth training. I think really there's a lot of resources. There's groups you can join as well too. Heather, you mentioned that you guys have a surgical dressing guide there that you guys use. And do you guys, I know at one point you did, or maybe you were building it, I can't remember, but were you guys doing a group? Were you pulling together a group of just HME providers that are in the space to kind of talk and share experiences and things of that sort?
Yes, we did that with negative pressure wound therapy. And we're just to understand the issues that are going on. And the group that we have right now is kind of what we have going forth with the surgical dressing group. Yeah. So shout out to all of the HMEs out there that are looking to be in a surgical dressing group. If you go through our training, you are automatically included in this group where we go through issues and we dive deeper into the LCD and the policy article. We also have a lot of reimbursement help here at VGM as well if you do have questions. And then there's also just, training on the VGM education as well for billing and reimbursement. So there is plenty of resources out there, like you said. So
yeah, home care. I know I'm part of the wound care work group. You're also a part of that wound care work group today, home care, and we meet monthly. And I know that on that particular call, we go over a lot of things that are happening, like folks are seeing different kinds of denials and things of that sort, brainstorm resources, and it's just a really good network of folks to get involved with.
Absolutely. Those are all really good resources. If you have any questions about all of them, about any of them, please reach out to either one of us. If you go on the members only portal at VGM2, you can access a ton of this information. Like you said, the checklist, we put that on the VGM members only portal as well for people to access. So, okay, with formulary development, in particular surgical dressings. I always start my presentations out when I'm talking about surgical dressings. There's like 80,000 different types of SKUs for dressings, right? That's where I think people think it's so confusing. And really, you have to simplify it down. There's so many wound care items in the marketplace, and the physicians that are prescribing the dressings, a lot of times they'll write the script that the last rep was in, detailing them about. They don't, understand all the ins and outs of all the different dressings out there. And how do you pull together a formulary that makes sense as the HME? How do you do that? Where do you even start?
Okay. So this part can be a little bit tedious because, like you said, there are like 80,000 SKUs that are out there, but it's really important to build this formulary. And the reason why it's important is if you just start going off of whatever any doctor writes, you're going to have all these different, you're going to be ordering all these random products. A lot of times they are going to be products that may not even make sense from a reimbursement perspective. And you definitely don't want to do that. Like you still have to make money. At the end of the day. So you still have to make sure that the products that you've got on your formulary are what I call reimbursement friendly. For those of you guys that are new into the surgical dressing space, unfortunately, there are certain products that are not recognized in their own code. Silver is one of those. And so when you look at like the alginate category, there's the alginate and then there's the alginate with silver. They're reimbursed the exact same, but the cost is drastically different between those two products. So you want to make sure that the physicians are ordering that when it makes sense. And so that's why it's really important to pull together a formulary. Now, when I say formulary, I don't mean that 100% of the orders that come in have to match that formulary or that you're going to switch what those prescribers send over, but you're going to train your referral sources to write scripts in generic terms. So you want them to write the scripts that say alginate as opposed to Aquacel or, foam as opposed to Alleven. And the reason why is because that allows you then to use your formulary that you have identified. When I do the formularies, I always like to do at least 2 tiers. So I'll have a tier 1 that's my most cost-effective products. And when I say most cost-effective products, I never pick products that are going to sacrifice positive clinical outcomes. So just because it's a really cheap product and maybe the cheapest cost that I have, if it's junk product, I'm not going to use it. It won't be on my formulary. So it's still quality products that I have in tier 1. They just are the best for me in terms of pricing. And then tier 2, I'll go with another vendor. I try to keep it so that tier 1's one vendor, tier 2's another. The other reason why I like to do that as well too is that if you build up that volume with a specific vendor, you're also going to get discounted pricing.
Yes.
They'll continuously give you that better pricing. You'll have a higher contracted tier and things of that sort. So that's why I also like to try to keep it that way. When I look at formulary, I always say if I can get at least like 70, 75% of all my orders hitting that formulary, then that's the sweet spot for me, because I know that I'm not going to get 100%, and I don't want to get 100%. I also want my prescribers to know that they do have the option to order a specific product for a particular patient, and that we will fill that. But we want that to be the exception. When that particular patient is they've been very difficult to find something that will work. You finally have found something that works. And so you don't want to sacrifice that for that particular patient. So I do think that it's important to still have that flexibility. So when I say formulary, I don't say it with like 100%, like it's got to be this, it can't be anything else. But you definitely just want to build that formulary so that way that you can kind of control your costs as much as you possibly can and participate in some of the volume discounts.
It's important for the educational purposes on the actual product. It's easier to be if you have a rep coming in for one company, and they can educate you and your staff, and then also the referral source on that particular brand of dressing. So I think that's why it's important to pick, like I know you said 70% of like the same company is kind of the sweet spot or your dressings. It's just easier that way, I think, too. So
it definitely is. And it also helps your sales and your marketing team as well when they're working with their referrals, because this is only going to work if you're training your referrals and if you're in servicing your referrals. And I think that that's one of the things with the surgical dressing category that gets a lot of HME providers tripped up, is that they don't take the time to spend with the referrals and in servicing them and educating them on A, their formulary, and B, how reimbursement works in the space. Those are two things that have to happen for your program to be successful. And it's a huge value add, because they're looking at us as the HME provider as the reimbursement experts. They don't know what's covered and what's not covered. And they're never going to remember that foam requires a full thickness wound with moderate to heavy drainage. They're just going to say, hey, I like foams, I'm going to put it on this wound. And so if you're a good HME provider and you're providing the value that you need to be and truly partnering with your referral sources, you're going to be having those conversations with them and letting them know, like, unfortunately, we can't reimburse for this in this situation, but here's some of your other options that we can reimburse for. And I think that's what's important, and especially talking to them about the formulary. These referral sources, they understand restriction as it relates to reimbursement. That's not something that's like foreign to them, but they don't understand what it looks like in our world. So it's our job to explain to them, like, the reason why we have these items is because of the reimbursement constraints that we have. So if you can stick to the generics and stick to these products, that's the best case that we've got for the patient and, for everybody from a business perspective.
100% agree. And that's when you say educating the referral sources, those are the successful HMEs that are doing wound care. That's what they do on a regular basis. All right. The order process. I want to dive in here a little bit on that. What are ways to simplify it for a referral?
So I think the biggest ways is and this is stuff you should have learned when you did your homework. So that first episode that we talked about, when we talked about going in and doing what I call the discovery sessions with your existing referrals or your prospects and finding out what they like, what they don't like about their current programs, is understanding their ordering habits and what works best for them in terms of how to place orders. I wish there was a way to say that there's one size that fits all, but of course there's not, at least not today. But there are things that, especially with like all the technology that's now in the space, that can be utilized to help with processing orders. One is ePrescribe. Both Parachute, DME Scripts, they both have wound care portals within their programs. Like, if that's something that's going to be available for that referral source for you guys to tap into, that helps to streamline ordering. If they're doing faxes, that's great. If that's the way that they want to go, if that's what they're used to. But, from an HME provider perspective, are you using any kind of like OCR software to help in pulling out the items that you need to pull out in the wound care space so that you've got all of the things that you need to get? Again, going back to the LCD and the policy article, one of the other things that trips up HME providers in this space is the fact that it is documentation intensive. And that's why it's so important to do the deep dive into the LCD and the policy article to make sure that you understand all the different elements within that assessment that you need to have in order to qualify that particular treatment. And so an OCR,
what is that? What's OCR mean? I just wrote it down.
I knew you were going to ask me that too. Can I find here? It's like something characteristic recognition thing. In other words, it takes that fact and it basically deciphers it.
It's like says, AI kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
All those buzzwords. Sometimes I can't remember what they mean, but y'all get the gist of it.
Okay. Yeah,
that'll be session 3.
Okay.
Buzzwords.
Love it. Good.
I think also with the order process too, and going a little bit further with the order process, and I think about this in terms of really like referral engagement. They don't know when a patient receives product. And so a lot of times they're the ones that are getting these calls that just say, hey, where's my stuff? I was just there. You guys told me that you guys were going to have this company send me my supplies. But they're calling the office because that's who they last talked to. That's where the order originated. And so anything that you can do in terms of referral engagement to help them know when that product has been delivered. And again, like Parachute, DME scripts, those are types of programs that can help that referral, that prescribing physician see like when their orders are actually being delivered to their patients. So I think that's important. And the other piece that I want to talk about too, as well with order process, is just patient engagement and how you communicate to the patient. So I don't think of the order process as just being a one and done type thing, because it's not. It's ongoing with surgical dressings. Like there's a resupply component here. So making sure that the referral source understands how you interact with their patients is very important. Mm-hmm. And again, there's lots of different ways to interact. Like, how do you handle resupply? Like, are you just doing calls? Do you do calls, emails, and texts? Do you have an app that you work with? Like, all of those things are really important. And then also when you do communicate with their patients, like, what do you communicate about? Are you just calling and asking them about if they need more supplies, or do you take it a step further? Do you ask them like how their wound is doing? Like, do you actually get to have a conversation with that patient and understanding, like, did they have any problems putting the dressings on? Did they have any questions about how to put the dressings on? Like those types of things. And just the way that you relate to their patients, I think is very important to that office and knowing that their patients are being taken care of.
Because very good point. They aren't getting those extra calls. And it's also a great opportunity to see if they're needing anything else. You know, because the HMEs, these people that are calling them from referrals, they're calling wound care patients all the time. They have a little bit of a knowledge of what's happening here. So are they what you like to call up caring? Are they asking them, do you need more saline? Where are you getting your gauze? You know, those kind of questions as well, just to make sure that they're taken care of, because you can throw a saline in the drop ship, right? Is easier than them driving down the street to the big box store on the corner. So it's also caring for them as well and seeing what else they need.
Yeah, because I mean, you're never going to get a wound treatment that doesn't tell you to clean the wound before you do something to it.
Yeah, right. Very true.
Are they actually cleaning the wound? I mean, that's not reimbursable product, but those are items that you can add, again, up caring, like I like to call it, to those orders for those patients, so that way they're being more proactive with their own treatment. They're doing the things that they need to do to make sure that they're getting the optimal outcome for that particular wound, and that's so important.
Yeah, very, very important. All right. Anything you'd like to add?
There's always something I want to add.
There's always something.
So we talked about like resources for like LCD and the policy article and doing the deep dive there. One of the other things that I think is really important during this phase is also paying attention to the CERT report. That's that error report. Yeah. And the reason why I think that that's important is because surgical dressings is unfortunately notorious for having the highest amount of errors in the DME-post space. So I think it's important that you pay attention to that report. And the reason it's important for you to pay attention to it is because it is going to help you tremendously in knowing how to not make errors. And so that's the reason why I think that it's important. I know we spend a lot of time when we do sessions, Heather, talking about that. And we do case studies all the time, trying to trip people up and seeing if they can figure out what's wrong in these different scenarios. But I think it's important. The last one that I looked at, which I need to refresh because I think it was the beginning of this calendar year, for the demi-post section for the service type surgical dressings, it was a 62% error rate. That's huge. That's very, very high. And when we break that 62% down, one of the things that I found that was it's kind of irritating, to be honest, was that 44% of that was because there was no documentation. And I'm like, seriously? Like, okay, that's rule one. Get documentation. Right. Yep. As long as you've got to get the documentation. That's rule number one. So I just feel like we should never even see that. That agree. Should not be the error. Now, the one that's higher, though, is insufficient documentation. That one's at 48%. Insufficient documentation, I understand that a little bit more because, again, there is a lot of elements that you're looking for within that assessment. And so it is a little bit more tricky. But even going deeper into that CERT report, then you can kind of see, okay, well, what parts of the documentations were insufficient? Like, where were people getting tripped up at? Were they getting tripped up because there was no note within the medical record that shows debridement of the wound? That happens quite frequently. So again, knowing like where the errors commonly are can help you to make sure that you don't fall into those traps. So definitely part of building your program out should be paying attention to the CERT report and any other types of error reports that you can find so that way you can just kind of know ahead of time, here's where people get tripped up. I'm not going to fall into these bad habits or into these patterns. So very good. Just one more little thing that I had to add.
No, that's very good. And I'm going to add something to that. So I have here at VGM, we've partnered with a couple of companies, Darby and Tenor, and they can go, they're AI, and they can go through and make sure the documentation is found in those to help you all companies out there. So I was very impressed at how very efficient and precise they were finding the correct documentation in the medical record. So that was really impressive. What?
That's the OCR I was talking about.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, that's what it is. I mean, it is just unbelievable what I've seen a couple demos, and it's just amazing. So they are out there to help you too. So perfect. Awesome. Okay, so that wraps up our session 2 on making sure that you're developing the best in program, wound care program here, and making sure that the needs within the existing referral sources and opportunities are there for growth. So thank you so much, Amanda. That was awesome. We're going to build on this. We're going to have a session 3, and we are going to talk about finding the right vendor partners. Yay. One of my favorite topics. So thank you again. And thank you all to everyone out there who's listening. We will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.